And here he is, the host of RinkWide Vancouver, our Canucks reporter, Mr. Jeff Paterson. He had a busy weekend. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good. I needed a couple of mini Yorkies on Friday morning. We woke up to a broken furnace in our house.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, it was cold.
Wrong time of year for that.
Yeah. Fortunately, temps have risen, and we were fortunate as well to get a guy in, and we're back up and running now. But yes, awoke to a very frigid household on Friday morning, but we're okay.
Oh, man.
Never like to see the breath inside the house.
Right.
It's a bad sign.
Jeff, we were talking on Friday. Can they win without Filip Hronek? Well, 2-0 without Hronek, 4-1 without Miller, and 13-7-3 without Thatcher Demko. Can they keep it up?
There's a lot that just doesn't make sense around this hockey club, let's be honest. But it is impossible to argue with the success on this road trip and really the overall success, given the storylines that we have covered really since training camp here. It's funny because I was on with you last Monday and I said, hey, Quinn getting kicked out of that game early in Ottawa might not be such a bad thing, all things considered. And Filip Hronek was still healthy and in the lineup at that point. You do wonder if Quinn basically getting the night off in the nation's capital and the Canucks winning that hockey game prepared him for what was to come. He was brilliant in Buffalo on Friday afternoon. The overtime shift was incredible, and then basically takes it to another level of Michigan alum back in familiar surroundings and just revved it up. And so much fun to watch. He's so confident right now. Not that confidence has ever been an issue, but you talk about the attributes you're looking for in a leader. They're all right there, packed into a relatively small package. But this guy just plays his heart out and is so much fun to watch. And to get the record now, continue his approach to Alex Edler's points mark for the franchise, and that's likely to fall given the way that he's racking up points here. So Quinn's leading, and other guys have had to step up, and obviously Jake DeBrusk has done an incredible job of that in the month of November and into December. P.S. Suter, who really does everything quietly, but just quietly going about his business and coming up with massive goals for the Vancouver Canucks here.
I believe it's pronounced Shooter, by the way.
And EP40 too, like because for all the angst in the market in October, he turned the page and was better than a point a game guy through the month of November when they needed him without Brock Besser and without JT Miller.
Well, further to your perplexing comment off the top, like I think their worst games of the season are some of their most staffed games of the season, if you will. Like they're real stinkers at home and stuff. I mean, the only guy that was really missing for those is Thatcher Demko. Like that was with everybody. Like, does this team need adversity to raise their game to another level? Are they playing down to oppositions? Like, how do we explain it?
Well, Brock missed the most recent homestand because he was concussed in that final game of the 3-game California road trip. But you're right. Otherwise, but clearly JT Miller wasn't right, and we all sort of speculated that. And even though he was out there playing, he wasn't doing the things that make him the special player he is. The home record, it is tough to figure out, and they do have to sort that out. One more to go on the road trip here in Minnesota, and then they're home for 6 in a row again. So we know that the last 6-game homestand was a complete write-off. They have to figure this out. And I want to believe that they are going to be better, and maybe they get a boost with the return of Thatcher Demko when they come here off the road. So we'll see about that storyline. Whatever the case, they're winning these narrow games, last 2 in overtime. The Boston game, essentially a 1-0 game that they seal into an empty net and make it a 2-0 hockey game. And even Ottawa, they played better than the 4-3 scoreline, but they're finding ways to come out on the right side of these tight and narrow hockey games. And Kevin Lankinen's a huge part of that. And then, look at special teams. Like all of a sudden, the power play has been able to chip away. Power play struggled early in the season. The component parts, when they're completely healthy, they should be a better power play than they've been. But Jake DeBrusk back on that top unit out of necessity. Connor Garland has had an incredible road trip as well. And we talked about Petey and Quinn Hughes. So they're finding ways, little bits here and there, just chipping away, winning some of these games at the fringes. But hey, whether you win 6-1 or 4-3 or overtime, doesn't matter. 2 more points in the bag for the Vancouver. 4-1. Like I had sort of set my own personal bar at 3-2-1, given the level of opponents. I think there were wins to be had out in this road trip. I thought 3-2-1. They got money in the bank here. Like, who cares what happens in Minnesota? They're coming home with 4 victories at least, and why not go into Mini and give it your best shot and see if you can't go 5-1?
Well, that might be the answer, Jeff. Level of opponent. last month, wins against Calgary and LA, and they're having good seasons. But, you look at it recently, it's a bunch of teams that are really struggling right now. How much do you think it's attributable to the quality or lack thereof?
Yeah, a lot. Like, you can't just bury your head in the sand and say, hey, all these wins are the same. They're not. Like, you can't worry about the schedule. You play the team that's there in front of you on a given night. So the Canucks don't have to apologize for anything here. But let's be honest. Going into Minnesota on December the 3rd, so almost 2 full months into the season, it's going to be the first time the Canucks have been visitors against a top team in the National Hockey League. And it's just the way the standings shake down. I mean, at the outset of the season, when the schedule is laid out, nobody knows who's going to be the top teams on December the 3rd. But the Canucks have beaten up on bottom feeders, and that hasn't always been the case with this Vancouver team. I mean, that was a bugaboo for quite a while. Even when they were a good team, they sometimes stubbed their toe against those teams that they should beat. But they haven't played Vegas. They haven't played Washington. They have played Carolina, but in Vancouver, they lost that game. Dallas and Toronto. And there are good teams out there that the Canucks just haven't seen. Now, New Jersey came through Vancouver as well. But in terms of the Canucks out of the road, as the standings sit right here, right now, the top 6 teams in the NHL, and the Canucks haven't had to be the visitor in their buildings. So, yeah, it's been favorable schedule. But again, credit to the Canucks for taking advantage of that. And then when they come off this road trip, they have to figure out a way to start putting points in the bank at Rogers Arena.
Well, given how shorthanded they are, though, I don't think you apologize for the weak schedule either. Nope. You're a shadow of yourself. So if you can eke out wins against whomever, I mean, you're still you're keeping the tires on the road.
Hughes, Jeff, now tied for 20th in overall league scoring, trailing only Cale Makar amongst the defensemen. Is it time to rev up the Hart Trophy campaign? Is the Norris Trophy campaign back at full thrust?
Yeah, I think it's a derby again for the Norris. He's closed the gap on Cale Makar, who had an incredible start, but through it all, people were poking holes at Makar's defensive game and just saying, outrageous point totals. I think maybe he has leveled up a little bit defensively, and his point totals are still pretty gaudy, but maybe not at the rate that they were early. And Quinn, through it all, has just played at this incredibly high level, and now the points are starting to come as well. And so I think he's narrowed the gap in the Norris race. And objectively, if people around the National Hockey League sat back and looked at the value of players to their teams, I think it would be impossible to come up with more than a handful of guys that would somehow rank ahead of Quinn Hughes and what he means to this Vancouver team. And we always come back to this point about, his superpower is tilting the ice and spending time in the offensive zone so that he doesn't have to defend. And Filip Hronek goes down, and he's played with Tyler Myers the last couple of games. They crushed their competition in Motown on Sunday. And so, is it Quinn Hughes doing it with one arm behind his back? A little bit. Tyler Myers obviously drafting along, getting the Quinn Hughes bump there, but so much of that is Quinn Hughes and the way that he plays and what he's able to do. So, yes, I think Quinn Hughes has leveled up from his Norris Trophy season, and 23 games into this campaign, I think absolutely he has emerged as a guy that deserves Hart Trophy consideration.
The shooting of DeBrusk and Suter is finally where we had heard that it would be for DeBrusk. And for Suter, I think it's just surprising. I mean, every time he's getting into position now, it's a he shoots, he scores mentality. And I don't know that he even had any inclination to pass that puck over to Sherwood. He knows that his shot is good. And, it's really good, Jeff. Like, he is rattling pucks in behind goaltenders just by looking at a spot and picking it.
Yeah, and the breakaway in Buffalo as well. Same thing. Like, confident guy, obviously. We've always said the hockey smarts are there. That's one of the things that sets him apart from others that you might consider sort of middle six players, a guy that's able to step in elevated roles and help the hockey club. And so, but now there's some finish to his game. You're right. So it's fun to watch when guys can pick their spots and hit their targets. And I just didn't have Suter pegged as one of the team's leading goal scorers at the outset of this season. But here he is. He's with 9, so he's one behind DeBrusk after the overtime goal that got him to double digits. And it's been kind of fun to watch all these guys sort of jockey for who would be the first to get to 10 goals in the season. Well, it turns out it is Jake DeBrusk, 10 goals in his last 14 games. So absolutely, he has stepped up with Miller and Besser out of the lineup. But everything that P.S. Suter does is kind of quiet, except the goal total, which isn't at 9 for a guy whose career best in the NHL is 15. And we've remarked about how consistent he's been, either 14 or 15 goals in his time in the NHL. I mean, he looks right now, certainly 20 seems like an attainable goal. Like, I don't want to get too caught up in pace and all. He's not going to score on every shot that he takes. It just kind of feels that way right now. But I do think 20 goals, given the way that he's playing, given the way that he's scoring, and we'll see ultimately where he falls if they get everybody back and healthy at the same time. But, I don't think it should be too much to think that P.S. Suter could generate 20 goals for the Vancouver Canucks this season.
And they're doing all this as Brock Besser sort of rounds back into Brock Besser a little bit. Are you seeing signs of that at all?
I thought he was really good in Buffalo on Friday. The DeBrusk goal, their first goal that tied it at 1, he's in front of the net, but he recognizes that there's a play to be made on the wall, heads over there, cuts off the saber, forces a turnover, and then Suter gets the shot, and DeBrusk, Suter got a shot, and it didn't go in. DeBrusk puts in the rebound there. And then the pass that he made to Garland on the blue paint, just tape to tape on the power play. And so I really liked, and he had the breakaway chance that he didn't score against the Sabres. But, I thought Brock was involved. I think of the games so far in his return to the lineup, that was the best. I'm not sure that Sunday's game in Detroit was at that same level. But this goes back to this idea of things that don't make sense, that not only were Besser and JT Miller out of the lineup for large chunks of the month of November, when Miller was in, he had 2 empty net goals. That was it. That was his goal-scoring contribution. And Brock has 1 goal since the start of November. Hasn't scored since he returned to the lineup. So, yes, they've missed them, but when they've been in, those 2 guys haven't contributed a whole lot, and yet through it all, the Vancouver Canucks have won 9 of their last 14 hockey games.
And they're not far off last year's pace. And who'd have thought we could say that?
Well, and what I really loved about the Detroit win is you're getting to the third period. You had talked about it, Jeff. It wasn't 4 and 6. It was 4 and 5.5 days, right? Because the matinee starts. The coach had said earlier in the week, I've got to find Lankinen more rest. We overplayed him a little bit. That's why his level slipped. You can't play Silovs right now. And so you have to go back to Lankinen. It looks like the fatigue is going to catch up with you after you blow the lead, after really, I thought, a terrible challenge from Rick Tocchet. I didn't think there was much chance of that goal being overturned. But to show the fortitude and resiliency to come back in that game late and then win it in overtime when you know the legs were a little bit heavy, like, that was a character win. Bad team, I get it, but character win for the Canucks yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Wings are killing penalties like the Canucks of the end of the Travis Green era and early Bruce Boudreau. Like, their penalty killing on home ice is now 57% or something for the season. Like, I don't know how Derek Lalonde is going to continue. They gave up 3 power play goals to the Devils on Friday and 2 yesterday, and then the Canucks had that late power play with the puck over the glass, and I thought, are the Canucks going to get 3 power play goals as well? Back-to-back games at home for Detroit, whatever the case. Their penalty killing is dreadful, but we all lived that and watched that with the Vancouver Canucks. So we know their pain, and to the Canucks' credit, they took advantage. Look, I thought yesterday was one of the few games this year where the Canucks scorers bailed Kevin Lankinen out. Not that Lankinen was poor, but how many times has he held down the fort and saved the hockey club? He gives up 4. And they were able to score 5 for him and get him that 10th victory on the road, 10-0. First guy ever in the NHL. That's pretty remarkable to think. This league's been around a while, that no goaltender has started a season 10-0 away from home. But Lankinen had to make some saves as well. One of the things that I pointed out yesterday, guys, is 14 times the Canucks have fallen behind 1-0, but only 4 times of those 14 have they fallen behind 2-0. So a lot of that's goaltending, right? You need saves in that moment. You fall behind 2-0, it's a different ballgame, but Lankinen's making saves until this team can generate the offense it needs to get back on even terms. And so that's sort of an underrated, the starts have not been great. The lowest shot totals in the National Hockey League in first periods, that part of it's real. Their starts have not been very good all season long. Falling behind 1-0, not great, but they don't fall behind 2-0 very often. And I think that's sort of their secret sauce, is that they found ways to prevent falling too far behind so that they can mount these comebacks when they have to.
So then, picking up on something you said earlier, you don't think Demko's available in Minnesota? And if not, do you go back to Lankinen, or because you're playing with house money, do you throw Silovs to the Wolves here?
There's a part of me that sort of contemplated the Silovs angle of it all. You've got 4 wins on this road trip. You're playing the top team in the National Hockey League. I get that on the surface, maybe that sounds like crazy talk to think that you'd throw Artur Silovs. Yes, Kirill Kaprizov leads the NHL in scoring, but really, the way that Minnesota has ascended the standings, they're the best defensive team in the NHL. They don't give up much, and Philip Gustafsson's having an incredible season in goal. So I know that they played that crazy 10-7 game in Minnesota. I'm not anticipating that we're going to see a repeat of that. Minnesota can generate, but really they do it by locking things down. My hunch is that it's going to be Lankinen to wrap up the road trip here. Early start in Detroit. They got to Minnesota on Sunday night. They're going to have a practice here on Monday. So there is a little bit of rest and recovery between these 2 games. I'm not expecting Demko at this stage. There weren't practices over the weekend with the condensed schedule and the early start times here. This is just me. I'm not reporting anything, but my hunch is Friday against Columbus. At home, they'll come off the road trip. They'll get a day off Wednesday, a practice day Thursday, and then a conventional 7 o'clock start time against a Blue Jackets team that scores a bunch of goals, actually, these days. They're actually a fairly high-scoring team, but they're still the Columbus Blue Jackets. And actually, that's a back-to-back game for CBJ. They're in Edmonton the night before. So maybe that is sort of the ideal pocket to slide Thatcher Demko back into the lineup for the first time in a long time, if, in fact, he's got the green light and it's all systems go. But no, I'm not expecting to see him on the final. I think that would be a tough assignment for anybody at the tail end of a road trip where fatigue's probably a factor for the skaters in front to throw Demko in and say, hey, bail us out against one of the top teams in the National Hockey League. I think you hold it off for at least one more game, but I do have Friday circled on my calendar. Let's see how things shake out at the end of the week.
Canucks are surrendering some goals, like not gaudy amounts, but there are goals going in. What do you make of the makeshift pairings right now with the injuries?
Yeah, look, Vincent Desharnais is a project. I think we know that. He was on the ice for all 4 Detroit goals in 13 minutes of ice time. Like, that's a scary statistic to keep in mind. And yet, he's probably a better option than Mark Friedman, although at some point maybe Friedman does get an opportunity just to see what he looks like again at the National Hockey League level. I will say, like, Hughes and Myers, great underlying numbers. And actually, I thought yesterday might have been one of Carson Soucy's best games, and really the 2 games. The penalty kill in Buffalo the other day, he was a huge part of that. The penalty kill was perfect. It wasn't perfect against the Red Wings, but Carson Soucy, underlying numbers were solid for him. And Noah Juleson with that heroic penalty kill shift in the 3rd period where he just continually put himself in harm's way, paying the price to help this hockey club. So, it's not ideal. We know that. And Quinn Hughes can't play 31 minutes every single game. The schedule is spaced out here. They've got 11 games between now and a 5-day holiday break. They're going to lean on the captain. I think he has to understand that. It's probably going to mean some practices off, maintenance days, take the morning off from skates and those types of things. Save every ounce of energy you've got for game action. And Quinn understands the assignment. But, Philip Hronek's going to be missed. There's no doubt. So far, so good without him. But I do think if there are going to be shaky nights for guys like Desharnais, then at some point this is going to catch up to the Vancouver Canucks.
And forward at some point too, right? So,
lastly for me, Jeff, ask you the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Nils Höglander plays just 17 minutes combined on the weekend in 2 games, and there's apparently trade interest. Höglander for Marcus Paterson, the Pittsburgh defenseman. You making that deal?
I probably am. And look, Nils Höglander's a better player than he's showing right now. He's just lost. There's no question about that. Another offensive zone penalty, 10 minutes of ice time, so he did crest double digits, but he's on the ice for a couple of the Detroit goals yesterday. One of them he stepped out of the penalty box and they scored, so I'm not going to put that on him. I didn't love the back check on the Tarasenko goal, but there were breakdowns all over the place. Brock Besser didn't look great in the back check there either, so probably not fair to single out Höglander, but every move that guy makes right now is under a microscope, and that's just life in a market like this one, and I don't understand. The message has been sent here for weeks, and yet every game looks the same from him. Like, I'm seeing no response, and I hear a lot on social, and people, he's afraid to make mistakes, and there might be an element of that, but if it's not happening for you, and it's been 18 games without a goal, like, what are you bringing to the mix right now? And the answer is very little. But, like, what got you into the National Hockey League? It was the hustle. It was the determination. It was the dogged pursuit of the puck and winning battles. Like, I'm not seeing any of that. And I think for him, like, those are the baby steps. Those are some of the things he can control. Goals, goalies are paid to make saves. Not every shot you take is going to go in the net. But he has one shot on goal in his last 4 games as well. So, like, he really does just look like a ghost out there right now. And if he's going to continue with that and play 7 to 10 minutes, then why wouldn't you look to address an area of concern elsewhere in your hockey? Like, the Nils Höglander in the here and now, he can be replaced by somebody on the farm. But I do get that we saw him score 24 goals last season. Is that player still in there somehow, some way, buried deep? Like, that's the fear, obviously, if you're making a trade. But this team needs help on the defense. So he is one of the trade chips, and I just think we've seen it before with Kuzmenko and Mikheyev, and earlier this year with Daniel Sprong, and now Höglander. You get in the doghouse, you generally don't get out for this coach. And so if that's going to be the continued pattern, then maybe it is time just to make that move and ship him along.
Yeah, I hear you there. There's also the school of thought beyond this season, right? That Nils Höglander is under contract and under what could be a very good contract if he can find his game and continue to play like he did last year, particularly with, who knows, Besser, Suter are UFAs. Going to be interesting to see how they monitor it, but I hear you on Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, and Sprong. Typically, when a player falls out of favor with this organization, they're on the move. Jeff, a civilized time for tomorrow's hockey game, although I saw you tweeting over the weekend, really 9:30 that wasn't difficult for me to make either.
It was difficult for me to remember. I've completely forgot about it.
But we're back at a civilized time of 5 p.m. for the Wild games tomorrow, so you will have RinkWide thereafter, and we'll be listening.
We will, at 1 o'clock on Sunday, a rare matinee
at home
at Rogers Arena. So if that seemed to catch some people off guard yesterday, I thought in my feed and timeline that they hadn't looked ahead at the schedule that far. But yeah, there's a 1 o'clock start against Tampa on Sunday, so probably good to get that one out of the way early, given that it's going to be a little hectic across the street.
Ms. Swift, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They have a 1 o'clock home game later in the month as well against Seattle. So lots of matinees, all the matinees with J-Pat on RinkWide.